그리고 그 과정은 유튜브를 통해서 라이브 스트리밍이고 Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shirley. So please take your seats in front and turn your attention to the vibration or Spanish language. Using the large audience way, we ask you to use the restroom that has been included. And for those who have not registered yet, please do so at the gate of the prime hall. And pre-attendants are able to pick up the rest of the time after you sign your name after your right next to your signature. Also, our lecture today will be broadcasted live on YouTube and Google. 저희 책처럼 이렇게 본인의 성격의 특별도만 알고 학교를 하게 되면 학교에 함께하고 있습니다. 아울러 2025년 2월 중에 단독 프로그램 그리고 5월달에 성사제 교수님과 함께
Hey, this is Sam talking. She doesn't have a microphone for YouTube, but I'll be using a mic, so don't worry. This isn't what the audio is going to be like.
So these statements and updates are uploaded on the National Affairs website, or you can use the register in the RT. Our lecture will begin in 2 minutes, and as we have mentioned, it will be recorded and will be broadcasted live on YouTube.
두 개 같이 들고 해야 되나요? 좀 바로 할까요?
5분에 시작하죠.
네. 네네네. We can start.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jae Hong-yeom, the Vice President for International Affairs at Konkuk University. It's my honor to introduce Professor Sam Richard in front of distinguished guests on and off the campus. I presume you already know Professor Sam Richard, but please allow me to briefly inform you of today's lecturer. Sam Richard, a world-renowned sociologist, is a professor at Pennsylvania State University and a distinguished professor at Konkuk University. Professor Richard is especially famous for his love for Korea and a unique lecture style. I bet you have seen his videos on YouTube. At the beginning, his lecture was just one of the guest lecture with a small audiences. However, it became famous and expanded through the time, and now it is an annual event at Konkuk. You are about to see the reason why it became so famous among Korean audiences. Today, Professor Richard will share his analysis on the upcoming US presidential election. Please welcome Professor Sam Richard with a big round of applause.
Thank you. 안녕하세요. I'm really happy to be back. I'm always happy to be here at Kongguk, and it is definitely my second home, so it feels really good. And I do want to say a couple of things. Thank you for the introduction, first off. And secondly, I will be coming back next month with my wife, Dr. Lori Mulvey, and we are going to give a second talk on the US elections because we will have had the elections by then. Hopefully, that talk will be rather uninteresting and maybe even boring. I don't know, but I feel like it's going to be a very difficult election, and I feel like the outcome of the election is going to be very complicated. And so I hope that's not the case. I hope I come back and I say, okay, I have nothing to report. You know, somebody won and that was the end of it. But I don't think it will be like that. And so these are very interesting times in the United States. As many of you know, but I suspect you don't know how really interesting they are. So the first thing I think that's worth talking about here is, you know, this is the question, and this is the question that everybody has. You know, in the United States, right? We ask each other, you know, who are we voting for? And, you know, who is your candidate? And it's, you know, it's what we want to know. And in this particular case, are you going to vote for, I will assume that most of you have heard the name Donald Trump. It is a name, an infamous name at this point. And the new candidate among the Democrats is Kamala Harris, who has been around for a while, but is new to the Americans really just 4 years ago. And so we ask, you know, who is your candidate? And what I would like to do is to help you to think sociologically about this. And I suspect while I have not looked at the data here in Korea, I am certain the data are actually very similar. And so it's really worth thinking about and what that means, okay? So in order to think sociologically, I'm going to show you some maps. And I'm going to go back and forth with these maps. But before I do that, I want to say that I'm going to speak for about a half hour or maybe 35 minutes or something like that. And then I want to open up to questions because, you know, really, I'm most curious. I'm not curious about what I have to say. I'm really curious about what questions you have about the United States at this point, okay? And we know that these elections are really important for many countries. So this is a map of counties. So in the United States, we're divided into, we have the nation, we have 50 states, and then each state is divided into counties. And, you know, each one of these little, what mostly are kind of squares of some sort, represent a county. And the red represents Republicans, and the blue represents Democrats. So what this means is that the red counties mean these are the counties that voted, a majority of the people in that county voted for Republicans, and the blue means the majority of people voted for Democrats. Now, a couple of these are different because you'll notice on this map, some of the red counties and the blue counties are darker or lighter than the other ones, and that means that's just an indication of how much the difference was in the votes, or how kind of lopsided it was, okay, as we say. But the other maps won't have that. And so the most important thing for you to do is kind of focus on the red and the blue. Okay, so this is 2000. This was a critical election because in the United States, the Supreme Court of the United States had to decide the election because it was so close. And in fact, the election came down to just a couple of counties here in Florida. The entire election depended on just what happened in a couple counties here. They decided the entire, in a way, the election in the sense that the Supreme Court had to decide. Okay? So here, this is 2004. So we'll go back to this one. We go back to this one. Now, these maps come from different places, so they can't, it's not a perfect map. I wish it was, because then you would be able to see. So notice the blue and the red. Notice the blue and the red here. And here's 2008. This is when Barack Obama won. This was a big election. So notice once again, blue, red. Okay. Are you noticing something? Like, you just keep, I'm going to go back and forth, and I want you to just think about what you notice about these maps. So here is 2012, okay? So just focus, for example, on this area right here, okay? So the pointer isn't very good, but kind of down in this area, all right? So watch. Okay? 2012. And here's 2016. Same thing, all right? Now, this is a little different. It's a different kind of map, all right? But nonetheless, now here's this. So here, I'm going to go through them really quickly. I'm going to go back and just watch. Pick an area out. Pick the area out up here in the, what we call in Maine and the New England states, up in this area, okay? So here. And what do you see? If I were to ask you, which candidate are Americans voting for? And when you look at all of the maps put together, and I ask you that question, which candidate do you think Americans will be voting for in this election? Will they vote for Donald Trump, or will they vote for Kamala Harris? And when I look at these maps, once again, go back through. This is really important. Now you're thinking like a sociologist here, okay? Look up here in this area. It's not very bright, so I can't really do it. But up in the top middle of the country, okay? So for the most part, let me see if anyone came to this conclusion. Americans aren't voting for a candidate. Most Americans are not voting for a candidate. Most Americans are voting for their party. For the most part, the red areas stay red and the blue areas stay blue. Now we have the idea that people pick out a personality. And then in picking out that personality, they decide, okay, which personality do I find to be the most interesting? Which person? Like, we would think that, especially when you have personalities, somebody like a Donald Trump, who is a big personality. But for the most part, just like here in Korea, just like most parts of the world that has elections, people vote for their parties. They don't vote for the individuals who are running for positions in those parties. So it doesn't really matter what those individuals can say or what those individuals can do. So people, in what is happening in the United States is we're a very divided country. And people have very strong opinions about these two different candidates. Very strong opinions. And so they come up with many ideas about these candidates. You know, Donald Trump, he is such a bad person for all of these reasons. Or Kamala Harris is such a bad candidate for all of these reasons. But they come up with those justifications after they've already decided that they're going to vote for their party. And many people, there are some people that are switching parties. There are some people who just absolutely refuse. They always vote red. They always vote for Republicans. But they absolutely refuse to vote for Donald Trump. And they have different reasons for that. And there are some people who always vote blue, always vote for Democrats, but for some reason, they have this idea that they absolutely cannot vote for Kamala Harris because she's such a bad person. Although I will say that in the United States, there are more people who have decided that there's no way that they can vote for Donald Trump. There are more Republicans who are refusing to vote for Donald Trump than there are Democrats who are refusing to vote for Kamala Harris. Okay. But there still are not that many people. So, this is the first thing. Because human beings around the world tend to think about candidates and the qualification of candidates. And the same is true here in Korea with your political parties. We think, we assume, we have the idea in our heads that we're voting for candidates. And most of us are voting for parties. That's big. That's a huge sociological statement, you see. Because what it means is that much of the freedom that we think that we have to decide to cast a vote for a particular person doesn't really exist. Because we've already made decisions that are based on parties. And the parties, for the most part, are not really very different. Wherever you go, if you have two fundamentally distinct parties, two dominant parties, as you have in Korea, as we have in the United States, because we have other parties, by the way, just like you have. But still, parties really aren't that different. They rarely are, because that's the nature, especially in a stable society. Now, we're testing that ourselves. So, now I want to show you something else. Foreign-born citizens. At this stage in history, the United States has more foreign-born residents than at any point in U.S. history. There are about 55 million people living in the U.S. We are a population of 335 million. We have more foreign-born people than at any point in our history. Okay, so now you think, all right, where are the foreign-born people? Now this is 2016, so this is 8 years ago, but things haven't changed in an extraordinary amount. So here, look here. Foreign-born residents. So now think like, okay, who? So this is up to 15%. The darkest color are the counties that have the greatest percentage of foreign-born residents, people living in that county who were not born in the United States. And down the lightest county, all the way down to perhaps 0, or I doubt there are any counties in the U.S. that don't have any residents who were born outside of the US. Okay? So, So now what are we looking at? So this is really important. People born outside of the United States are really helping to define elections in the US. Who look, much more likely to be blue, to be Democratic. Now, that says a lot of things about the US, and it says a lot of things about foreign-born people, which, doesn't, I'm not going to say much about that because it doesn't, wouldn't be, if this were a US audience, then I would have much to say, but I won't say much. But I wanted to point that out. Okay, so now, let me show you a few other things. Right here. Here's a couple things you need to know about the elections in the US. Donald Trump is a populist candidate. And in English, a populist candidate means that it's a candidate, a person who is really focused on representing the people. And the emphasis is on the people. And you can they define populist candidates, politicians define the people in lots of different ways, but it's the people. And a populist candidate is a candidate who, for whatever reason, has crossed over some magical, it's like this stairway right here. For some reason, they have crossed over some magical barrier in which they have in English, I don't want to use this word because it's a complicated word, but a ground swell. There is a lot of support that emerges from below that people identify for some reason with that person. Now, in the United States, usually a populist candidate means that it is a candidate who represents ordinary people, common, average people. Now, the irony, if you know anything about this candidate, Donald Trump, is that he is not an ordinary American. He is an American who comes from a great deal of privilege. He is an American who comes from a different class than the average ordinary people. But for whatever reason, and this is the nature of populism, we've seen it here in Korea, we see it all over the world in different ways. For whatever reason, there is a energy that goes toward this person that says, he is the person who can represent me and represent us more than anybody else. Common, average, working class, often people who identify as poor or financially struggling. Like this guy, this billionaire candidate, he knows me, he understands me. It makes no sense in the way of Donald Trump. You might ask, how can people who don't have a lot of power and don't have a lot of money think that this person who has many businesses, who's worth a couple of billion, Donald Trump, just so you know, he says he's worth about $10 billion. But the best analysis that was done by the Wall Street Journal, by investigative reporters who were really, really, really dug into his finances and what he's actually worth, estimated that he's worth about $1 billion. 10 billion, 1 billion. Well, there's another example of a person who exaggerates so many different things. But populism isn't rational. Populism is like a movement. It's an experience, and nobody can explain what that is. That somehow it's like a new K-pop group. That most of the K-pop groups really are not that different from one another. So all the time you have these new K-pop idols, and they come up, and you have one group and another group, and every month or so there's another group that are several that enter the scene. And then you kind of wait to see which ones are going to grab hold. And oftentimes you can't explain why one grabs hold, why one really captures the attention of people. I remember here at Kongguk almost 2.5 years ago, not last May, but 2 Mays before that, I was here and I watched New Jeans perform here, right? In the pavilion for your, I don't know, some of you were probably here, right? And I watched and I said, yeah, that's kind of, wonder if they'll become something. They just seem like most any other group. To me, as someone, I'm a musician myself. I started playing music when I was 12 years old. So my initial desire in life was to be a rock star, So I played music for 10 years as a drummer. And, that was it. I didn't want to be a professor. I wanted to be a rock and roll star or just a rock and roller. I didn't want to be a star. I just wanted to play music, right? So I have some way, when I look at musicians, I'm always thinking, what makes that group special? And in this world of K-pop, oftentimes there's no rhyme, there's no real reason for it. It's just for some strange reason, somebody or some group just gets picked out to be the one, and then there's this energy behind them. In New Jeans, if you took me back to watching them, there was nothing special about New Jeans. But then I turned around and 6 months later, they had started their rise here when they performed at Kongguk. But several months later, they took off. And I thought, man, what was that? And sometimes there's not even a magic formula. There's not even a person. There's nothing that explains it. That's how populism is. Nothing would explain it. Now, there are some things that if you speak English really well and you listen to Donald Trump, he speaks in a way that's different from other politicians. It's kind of like me when I give talks like this. Some people give talks, and many people would give a talk in this room, and they would stand behind this podium, and they would kind of read from their notes, and, that would be kind of stiff, and, I would follow the notes, and I would make sure that I got it right, and, I have no idea what I'm going to say 1 minute from now. I don't know what I'm going to say next. My next sentence, I don't know what I'm going to say. But if I were reading from my notes, I would know exactly what I'm going to say. And you would know just how to explain who I am. But I'm not doing that. I'm walking around the stage. I'm talking. I'm saying something that I've never said before. You have no idea what I'm going to say next. I have no idea what I'm going to say next. But it just comes out. That's how Donald Trump is. And when people watch him, they're like, I like that guy. Because he just says it how he sees it. But politicians don't learn that. Politicians learn to stand behind stages like this and follow their notes. Because if they're not following their notes, they might say something wrong. And if they say something wrong, then it's going to get reported on the next day in the paper. Donald Trump says, I never say anything wrong. Everything I say is perfect. Doesn't matter what I say. And you can report on it that I said something really crazy. That's better for me because you're reporting on it. Because in the end, everyone who is reporting, you are against the people. I'm for the people. And people will say, oh, yeah, how can you be for the people? You're a billionaire. And he said, oh, you think the American people don't want to be billionaires? What are you saying? The American people should be poor and stupid? Everything he does, he turns it around to hold him up. That's what populists do. Right? Actually, not to hold him up, to hold the people up. So if you critique him, you critique the people. And he's very refreshing as a candidate. Again, if you speak English really well and you listen to him, he's very refreshing because he's saying just whatever he feels like saying. And people get tired of people who refuse to say what they actually think. Like, well, what do you actually believe? What do you actually think? So because I'm speaking like this, You have the idea that as an audience, that I'm saying what I actually think. I'm being truthful. I'm being honest. I'm being forthcoming. It feels that way because we make a connection, because I'm being like a real person. But if I'm standing over here, you don't feel that. You feel like I'm following some script. And because I'm following a script, I'm not being authentic. I'm not being a real, honest person. So it doesn't matter if he was poor or if he's rich. The point is, he's saying what he actually thinks. And that's what a populist does. And that's how you have to understand Donald Trump. Populists have that. It's a very fascinating thing. I feel like sometimes I watch him and I think, man, I mean, I'm an academic, so like I don't support or reject candidates. You know, I mean, it's different. I analyze things and I decide who I'm going to vote for or who I'm going to vote against. It's not who I'm going to vote for. It's the candidate who's the least appealing. Because you get to a certain point where it's the one who's least appealing than anybody else. Not the one that you really, really enjoy. Okay. I'm just really appreciating that. I never get to talk about this. I don't talk about this in the US. I never talk about this with my students. So everything that I've said thus far, the maps, that's one thing, but anything like talking about Donald Trump, I never talk about Donald Trump in the United States. It's just like, whatever. But if I were 20 years old, I'm from the working class. So, I grew up without having much money. My father died when I was 9 years old. My mother worked as a secretary. We didn't have money at all. And life was really difficult. And I was in the working class. So nobody around me went to college. None of my friends' parents went to college. The father of one of my friends actually went to college, but nobody else. So I had nothing. I didn't know doctors and lawyers and architects and engineers. I knew nobody at all. So for me, if I were 20 years old, if I were the age of most people in the room, I would be voting absolutely for Donald Trump. Man, this guy. So, please, this guy. Absolutely. He would be the only choice. Okay, so here's something else. Things are changing in the United States. Donald Trump, because he is a populist, he has forced the Democratic Party, including Kamala Harris, to embrace many of the most divided or divisive is the English word, right, of his policies. So if you're not following the elections very much and you think, there must be a big difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, especially since Donald Trump is such a bombastic, such a big character. Well, actually, Kamala Harris has already decided, because of Donald Trump, because he is the populist candidate, she has to move closer to him. She can't move away from him because he's the one that has the swell of support. He's the one. Nobody wears hats and slogans for Kamala Harris. So stiff trade tariffs all over the world, especially with China. So the Democrats don't support that. They have not supported that, but they do now because they have to. Slowing or stopping the immigration flow. Even so much as deporting immigrants, although she hasn't fully gone to that place, but she has agreed that, we will have to send immigrants back home if they don't have papers. So she has already agreed to that. Expanding oil drilling in the US. The Democrats, this party, the blue party, are very strongly against drilling for oil. But now suddenly they're going to drill for oil, including in my state. We drill for a lot of oil in my state. And much groundwater gets polluted. We have many problems, but now we're going to move in that direction. And tough, really tough policies on China, which the Democrats don't really support, but they do now. So if you're thinking there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans, there used to be, but for the most part, the two are coming together because that's what happens when you have a populist. You have to support that candidate. Okay? Cool? So think about that. I'm cluing you in. When you think about the US elections and you think about these two very different candidates, they're increasingly not very different. They're coming together in the center. It's like, oh, okay. That's really interesting. So many people now are starting to say, well, is it really going to matter who wins? Really? Is it really going to matter who wins? I mean, I've got to deal with Donald Trump or we deal with Kamala Harris, but, and the Republicans, they see her and they say, oh, she's a communist or she's a socialist. But they don't really think that. Some people do, but most people who really are aware don't. But these are what they say. You have to say that kind of thing. And Donald Trump, he's a fascist. They don't really think that. Yeah. Okay? I want to show you a couple things now. I want to show you who people are voting for. And then this is kind of the last thing, and then we're going to open it up. So these are Americans, all right? This is a poll that was a fairly recent poll in August, right? So we look at people, Americans of Asian or Pacific Island ancestry. So look, you can see that 57% are saying, wait, hang on. Yeah, again, it's not very weak, but 57% are saying, okay, well, we're going to vote for Kamala Harris. And, 24% of Americans of Asian ancestry, this includes people of Indian ancestry, of South Asia ancestry. Okay, we have a large number of South Asian Americans. 7% are saying, somebody else. And I'm going to talk about Koreans in a second, by the way. And then look here. You may have the idea that that white people are the ones who are really supporting Donald Trump. And people who are not white are the ones who are really supporting Kamala Harris. But look at the numbers of people, including Black Americans, 13% in this poll, and it's actually gone up a little bit. Higher. Okay, it was much higher. When it was Biden, it was 21% of Black Americans were supporting Donald Trump. But it went down because Kamala Harris is half Black, half Indian, right? So that changes a little bit, right? And explains the Asian 57% voting for Harris also because so many Americans of South Asian or Indian ancestry or heritage feel connected to him. Hispanic, look at Hispanics. People from Latin America. There's not a great difference, right? And then here, white people. And by the way, the US population, about 2/3 of the population at this stage, less than 2/3 are white. So, what is happening in some states, it's more than half the population are white, including California and Florida and so on. Okay? So, interesting. So this idea that white people support Donald Trump and Black people and brown people, meaning Asians and Hispanics, support Kamala Harris, it's like you have to question that. It's a lot of people, actually. All right. So here's Asian voters in the US. Right. This is from the Pew Research Center. This is what people, this is 2024, okay? This is the party that people are affiliated with. Look at, so let's just start with Koreans. 28% of Korean Americans, approximately, right? Because there are people in the center who are neither, right? You'll note, and because, you know, most all of you are Korean, so that means you're pretty good at math. You can see that these don't always add up to 100%, but 28% on average, right? Over a quarter support Republicans, but most support Democrats for whatever reason, this kind of sense. And I don't really know what Democrats stand for anymore. It's changing to a great degree. There's an idea of conservatism, meaning that the Republican Party tends to support a smaller government, and a Democratic Party are people who tend to support higher taxes and supporting building the government out to solve problems that people have. So if you want to fix pollution, what you need to do is you need to get the government to force people who pollute to stop polluting. Whereas if you believe in smaller government, what you do is you say, no, listen, we leave it up to people who pollute to stop polluting. We encourage them, and we find ways to support them making the decision to not pollute. So that's the difference between these two. Smaller government, larger government, but use the government to solve problems. And to use the government to solve problems, meaning you have to have a really strong government. You have to have, you know, these are complex problems that we have, just like here in Korea. You have a lot of complex problems. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to solve the problem of the Korean birth rate issue? Koreans need to start having more babies. That's just fundamental. We know that. And we know that there are going to be serious consequences to Koreans not having more children. And the consequences are going to take effect, and they're already taking effect, but it's going to really rise up and show itself in 10 years, in 20 years, and definitely in 30 years. Korea is going to look very different unless you can increase the birth rate. So now you got two ways to do that. One, well, why don't I just get people to tell Koreans to have more babies? Come on, man, let's go. You just need to understand, you need to have more children. And each one of you sits in your seats and you say, oh yeah, we need to have more children. Yeah, we need to have more children. But me, I'm going to make my own decision. But we as a nation need to have more children. But me, I'm going to make my own decision. I'll decide. I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but that's every other person. If you believe in a stronger government, so again, that is getting people to make the best decision for themselves and for the larger community or the larger nation. Okay? But now, if you have a stronger government, you say, hey, so I'm in charge of this policy here in Korea, and we got to get Koreans to have more babies. What are we going to do? Well, first off, we're going to have a government commission, and the commission is going to study the issue. So we're going to pay money for that, and the commission is going to decide what we need to do as a nation. And then once we decide what we need to do as a nation, we're going to have policies in place. And with these policies, we're going to tell people, look, Koreans, you need to do this, and you need to do that. And we're going to set up these benefits or these, whatever it is that we need to establish so that you will make decisions to have more babies. We're going to leave it up to you, actually. We're going to make it so that you actually have the children that we need to have as a nation. So we're going to force it to happen, right? And we're going to build what other policies we need to build in order to make this happen. And that's the difference between a strong government and a weak government. A strong government comes in and it makes decisions for us. And of course, you as Koreans, Those of you who are, some of you are not Korean, but those of you who are, you're more used to that. You know, that sense that, okay, we can have, this is what we're in this as a nation. You know, you're a small nation. You're 51 million people, relatively speaking. You're a small nation. So you can feel, and you're very homogenous in the culture. So you feel connected to other Koreans. You feel that. But we're not like that in the US. We're a very large nation. We're very multicultural. We have people from all over the world. We have, you know, again, 55 to 60 million of us are not even born in the United States. We're from other nations. We come there. Okay. We're very individualistic. Like we don't have that same connection, and we don't trust the government in the way that you do. And you may say, Koreans will often tell me, well, we don't trust our government either. I'm like, hang on a second. You don't know what that means to not trust your government, really. Come to my country. Talk to Americans. It's a whole different world. The things that you say is distrust, that's not distrust. That's just you kind of voicing a negative opinion about it. Distrust is when you believe nothing that government says, and anything your government says and anything they try to do, it's bad. You see it as bad and you don't believe it and you don't follow. That's distrust. It's different. Okay, so look at this. It's kind of interesting to see, you know, look at Chinese, right? I mean, look here. Look Vietnamese. It makes you wonder, okay, what happened with Vietnamese? Like, why does, you know, like more Vietnamese support the Republican Party than anybody else? What is it about Vietnamese? What is it about it? It's kind of interesting, right? I think it's interesting. I don't have an answer to that, by the way, so maybe somebody here does. All right, hang on. Let me see what my next slide is. So I can decide where we're going to go. Oh, here. Okay, let's look at this. So here are Asian voters in the U.S. Note that younger voters are much more likely to support the Democratic Party. Again, that doesn't mean Kamala Harris. It means the Democratic Party. And as you get older, and this tends to happen, you tend to lean more conservative in a way. So people just kind of notice how that happens here. Asian voters who have a high school degree or less are more likely to be red voters. And the more education you have, postgraduates, so that means people who have gone and gotten their master's degrees or they're lawyers or they're doctors or they're PhDs like myself, right? You're much more likely to lean toward the blue. It's kind of interesting. And of course, that's true not just with Asian voters, that's true with all the voters. There are very few people in the US who are like myself. You know, not very few, but definitely, say, like college professors are going to lean toward voting for Kamala Harris than lean toward voting for Donald Trump. And that doesn't mean that the more education you have, the smarter you are, and so the more likely you are to support Democrats. It just simply means that you move in that direction, because the more education you have does not mean that you're smarter. High school students, remember that. Just because you go to college doesn't mean it's going to make you smarter. In fact, I feel like the more education I have, the older I get, the dumber I get, the less I know. You know, that really, and now I feel like I don't know anything. God, if you only knew, I feel like I don't know anything about anything. It's terrible, actually. It's terrible to get to my age, really. You think if I have my eyes open and I think I'm aware and I think I'm learning, and then I get to my age and I realize I don't really understand anything about the world. Yeah, it's complicated. All right. I'm being serious, by the way. Okay, what else do we have? All right, Korean citizens. I found this, which is kind of interesting. This is from 2020 with Joe Biden. They asked Korean citizens, this was an Ipsos poll, you know, who would you vote for between Biden or Trump, right? The people here in Korea, not Korean Americans here in Korea, right? And 28%, I don't know, which is probably most Koreans. If you really, even the people who gave an answer, either the things are so complicated, I don't know. I study this stuff and I'm still not really certain what the differences are. Right? But I just found that and I thought, yeah, maybe that would be interesting to you. I feel like the same would be true today, though, probably if we asked Koreans. If I took a poll of Koreans, it probably would be the same. Even though, you know, Donald Trump is saying, hey, listen, y'all, if I win, you, Koreans, you're going to pay more money for the defense of Korea. Like, you're going to pay. This is going to have consequences for you. Like, you want American troops over here to help defend you from North Korea? You're going to pay. We're not paying for that. Like, these are real consequences for you. You know, you want a greater defense against China? You want our presence here in this peninsula? Well, you're going to pay a lot of money. So it does have consequences. But you know what? Remember, Kamala Harris is going to start saying the same thing. Because he's a populist. And he's going to get, what he's doing is he's building up an awareness. Even though Americans have no idea what the United States is doing here in Korea. They have no idea. They don't know how many troops are here. They don't know what our troops do. They don't know why we're here. They have no idea how Korea is related to China. Most Americans probably don't really understand the difference between China and Korea. North Korea, South Korea. I come over to Korea and people say, oh, what Korea, where are you going? North Korea or South Korea? I'm like, come on, seriously? Like, seriously? I'm going to North Korea. I tell them, I'm going to North Korea. Yeah, that's what I do as an American. I come over, I fly into Pyongyang and I go and I hang out. And then if I feel I got to come down to Seoul for the weekend and I go travel at Itaewon and then I go back to Pyongyang and like they're like, oh, all right, yeah. Where's Pyongyang? What's that? I'm like, oh, it's a city in China. Oh, a city in China. Wait, you say you were going to North Korea? Like, what do you mean? It just does. They don't know. But they follow Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is saying, hey, you're going to pay more. So the Democrats are going to have to follow, right? And they could resist that, but they've already taken the lid off. You see, they've already started. This is what populists do. They start the process, and then you got to follow. So it's not good or bad. I mean, I'm not even saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what happens. I'm a sociologist, so it doesn't, you know, populists can be very good actually, because they can inspire the people to feel like they want to get involved somehow. You know, I want to be involved in the politics of my nation. I want to be involved in what happens here. So in that sense, populism can be very, very good. Yeah. All right. Listen, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay, I'm finished. I'm done. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, all right. So here's the thing. You don't have to applaud. I really am happy to answer some questions, but here's what we have. We're going to need, you have to, in order to, if you want to ask a question, we have two microphones. One is because we are live streaming. So like I'm speaking in this mic, but I'm also speaking on this mic. This mic is going to the live stream. So if you want to ask a question, you have to use the handheld microphone, but also there's this tiny little microphone that people who are watching the live stream can listen to your question, okay? So you're going to get two microphones. All right. All right, let's wait. So you got to make sure that I know we have two microphones out here, but we can only you got to go with one or the other. All right. So who has a question they want to ask? I have questions. We have a question from the gentleman. Yeah. Yeah. So just hold both microphones. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
No, just have him hold the other. Yeah. Okay. You can hold it there. All
Okay.
right, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Mikołaj. I'm from Poland, and I would like to ask about swing states. You didn't mention this topic, and I think it's very important in terms of American elections, especially your state, which is like Pennsylvania state, where we have like big minority of Polish descent people. And this is like huge topic right now in Poland about the how important will be vote of those people. As we know, 4 years ago, those type of states decided that Donald Trump won in the Rust area. I don't know exactly how you call it in English, but also this is the place where the J.D. Vance come from. And I would like to ask how really important those votes will be. Is like minorities have a big influence on the results in the swing states.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So, it's really important. So here, let me first say something about there are certain states, right? In the United States, it's about we have this thing called the Electoral College. That a candidate can win the majority of votes of all the voters in the country, right? You can win 55% of the votes and still lose the election because because each state has a certain number of electoral votes. So if the state goes for a certain candidate, that means all their electoral votes go toward that candidate. So you really have to win the states that have the greatest number of electoral votes. So you have to get more than half. So you might receive 55% of each voter's vote, but it matters if you win the state. And so in the United States, all but probably 43 states, it's really clear who they're going to vote for and which candidate are going to receive the electoral votes for that state. So in Pennsylvania, let's say we have 28 electoral votes. Well, in Pennsylvania, where I live, this is an issue because we're not sure who's going to win. Some polls say it's 50.5% for Trump and 49.5% for Kamala Harris. And other polls say, no, it's 50.5% for Kamala Harris and 49.5% for Trump. So we don't know. Other states, it's like, well, listen, 55% of the voters in the state are going to vote for Trump. So we know Trump's going to win. So we don't even care what happens in the state. We are very clear that state, California, for example, it is absolute certainty that California is going to vote that Kamala Harris will win California. So Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate, is going to receive all of the electoral votes for California. So nobody even talks about California. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Go and vote and be done. Okay? In my state, in Pennsylvania, we don't know. So therefore, many people are focusing on Pennsylvania. And there are 5 or 6 other states that are like Pennsylvania that we're not sure which way they're going to go. So right now, if you look at my phone and you look at text messages, today alone, I've received 20 or 30 text messages from Trump or Harris campaigns trying to get me to change my vote or to vote for them because I live in Pennsylvania. But in California, they don't waste any time in California. Nobody cares. The Biden people know, or the Harris people know they will win California, and the Trump people know they will lose California. Okay? So now, that's the first thing I want to say that I didn't say. The second thing is that, well, you have people who are Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans tend to lean toward, they tend to go in the direction toward the Democratic Party. And so a lot of energy is being focused in that direction, right? And so they become really important. So whereas I am getting a certain number of text messages every day, if I were Hispanic or if I were Korean living in the US or I was Black, I would be getting even more because they really matter for the vote. So we will see. Is that your question mostly? All right. It's a very complicated question.
Sorry.
Also, it's
Yeah,
hard to hear.
mostly yes. Mostly my question was focused about how important it is, because right now it's quite big issue in Poland because our president is
Yeah.
more connected to Republican country. He's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
conservative, but our prime minister, which won elections one year ago, is more connected to democratic country,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
both sides criticize each other for being involved in elections in different country.
It's a very split country in your case.
Very, very
We
right
don't
now.
have that in the US, but yeah, go ahead.
And our citizens living in the US usually were lean mostly to conservative parties, and votes which we get from abroad usually are going to conservative party in
Yeah.
Poland.
Yeah.
So I was interested in this topic is also important in US because in Poland right now everybody's saying, oh, Polish people will decide how Pennsylvania will vote for a president.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Pennsylvania is, 2 weeks ago, everybody was thinking that Pennsylvania was going to be the state. The election was going to come down to Pennsylvania, and that's it. It's the only state that mattered. Now they're starting to change that. The polling has changed, and they're starting to see a couple other states that are like just as important. Yeah. But it has a lot of implications for the world. Yeah. We're not thinking about Poland, for example. Most Americans are not. I am, because I do a lot of work with NATO, right? So I'm really thinking about this. And what happens in the US has a lot of implications for NATO. And therefore, it has a lot of implications for Russia and Ukraine, which has a lot of implications for Poland, because you're right in the center of all of these things. Yeah. Huh. All right. Yes. All right, you ready? Did that microphone turn off? Yeah, all right.
마이크 걸 거예요. 잠시만요. 잠시만요. 찾고 있어드릴게요. 말하시면 돼요.
Hello, I'm a student from Konkuk High School University, Konkuk University High School, and I wanted to ask you a question about what qualities are needed for a great leader, just in general, not in this US election, but also in other countries. What kind of qualities are needed for a good leader?
What policies?
What qualities?
Yeah. What qualities make a great leader? Man, that is such a cool question. That's a really good question. Huh. Here's the thing. You could argue, I could make the argument that that one policy that makes for a great leader is the leader that doesn't waste time listening to the grievances of people, of individual people. The great leader is the one that sees a vision and pursues the vision, and they don't really care what people think. And that's Donald Trump. He's just like, I can't waste time. Like, it's like me. If I wasted my time thinking about what each one of my students wanted in my class, I couldn't teach my class. It's like, so I don't think about my students. I don't care what they think I should talk about. I don't ask them. I'm not interested in them. I've been teaching for 40 years. I have an idea of like, okay, I've been doing this a long time. I know over the years what students think, so I'm gonna just do it. But if I listen to them, then they start complaining and like, I don't like this, I don't like that. And then I think, oh, wait, hang on, I'll change, let me change. And then I'll do this over here. And then, no, I better do this over here. And a great leader doesn't do that. A great leader says, let me just go forward and do what I need to do. And then I'll let it go. I can make the argument that that would be a great leader. And I can make the opposite argument that the great leader listens to the people who they're leading. And you get input from the people that you're leading, and you make sure that they feel like they're contributing to what you're doing. But that also can be a problem. And ironically, strangely enough, which just makes it really interesting, is that Donald Trump, who really only listens to himself, and I think he even hears voices sometimes. I don't know who he's really listening to, because he just wakes up one day and he says this, and he wakes up the next day and he says that. And he's not really listening to the people. But so many people feel like he's truly is speaking for them. And maybe a great leader, therefore, is the one, again, who just, the people feel like they're speaking on their behalf, even when they're not. I don't know. It's very interesting. Okay, how about that? Did I answer it? Also, a great leader would be somebody like me. Actually, I'm a terrible leader. I'm terrible. Oh my God. I'm the worst leader you could ever imagine. Yeah. All right. Yes.
잡아드릴게요. 말씀하시면 돼요.
네.
You can-
Okay, thank
yeah,
you for
go
your
ahead.
lecture. And I heard that you said more about who is Donald Trump than who is Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
And you also said about why is populist. So I want to ask you, who is Kamala Harris in point of view of you?
Who is she from my perspective?
Yeah.
Huh. Kamala Harris is a person who tells all of her people around her to say, hey, go find out what the people say. So you're gonna give a talk at Konkuk University. Go find out what the students think about some issue. Find out what the professors think about some issue, and then report back to me. And then you find out, and then that person tells their speech writers, okay, listen, the people at Konkuk University, they think this right here. So write a speech in which I can say exactly what it is that they want to hear me say. And so I will say that. Then they will come to the talk and they will say like, oh, okay, well, I like this person because, they are saying what I want to hear. That's who Kamala Harris is. And she's really good at it. It's what most politicians are. And they're pretty good at it. They might make mistakes, but that's what they're doing. Yeah. I don't do that, by the way, as you might imagine. Like I didn't write a talk out. I didn't know what I was going to say until I said it. I mean, I have my slides, but I'm just going to go wherever I go. I'm more like Donald Trump, you know. Yeah. Yeah. That's why a lot of people feel like Kamala Harris doesn't really represent them, you know, because they know that she's saying what she thinks she's supposed to say. Yeah. How about that? Did that answer your question? It's like okay, somebody else. What do we got? Yeah.
Thank you for good lecture. I think populism is a big problem, but also very natural phenomenon because in democracy system, if you get more poor, then you win. So many of the like Trump,
Yeah.
Biden make policy like for many people
Mm-hmm.
that makes the issue they didn't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
So why this problem happened? I think why this problem happened is the fundamental of the democracy system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should modify the democracy system, and I think you agreed with. Did you agree with my idea?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Then how we can modify the system?
I don't know. I don't know if we can. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think in the end, it's just we just have to accept that things are really, if I'm understanding correctly, I think we have to just accept that these things are really complicated. Yeah.
Well, this issue is, I think, very, very big problem.
Uh-huh.
Can destroy our life or
Yeah. Yeah. No, it can. Absolutely. But it may be that it's at this stage in the development of democratic nations, it may be that it's just what's going to happen. Yeah. 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 Thanks. That's a good question. Hmm.
So I've been researching about the US elections, and I found that like they're using the system of the winner takes all. And if that's true, like how does it work and how does it affect the US elections?
Wait, okay, hang on. I want so please repeat your question. Yeah.
I researched about the US elections.
Uh-huh.
So it showed me like there's a system called winner takes all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So some people chosen from Americans,
Yeah.
they vote for them,
Yeah.
and the election works like that. I heard like that.
Yeah.
So is it true, or if it's true, like how does it work, and does it always work like that, or is it like something
Yeah.
different?
No, it becomes in the US election, like it's not possible. So you can have the presidency be connected, like the Democrats win the presidency, but the Republicans control the legislative branch, right? So the Senate or the House or something, right? And that's the balance of power that we hope to have. And we generally speaking, it's mostly not a good idea to have the presidents, to have one party that controls the White House, the presidency, and Congress, right? So the Senate and the House, right? It's mostly not a good idea because then it goes this way, and there's no check. We say check on the power. There's no ability to like hold to stop one party from really taking over. Yeah. So that's the winner take all kind of idea. We don't have a way. Well, the winner can take all, but also at the same time, the most consequential votes in the United States, for the most part, you need to have 2/3 majority in the Congress to win something, and it's very difficult to get that. So that's why it's very often one party won't have extreme control over another. Yeah. Huh. Are we good? Another question? Yes. Man, okay. And then at the top. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your lecture. How would the gunshot against Trump affect the election? How would you think? Like, would
Who's
Democrat?
gonna win?
How would the gunshot against Trump? You remember?
Oh, how much? Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, the gunshot.
Oh, the
Yeah.
assassination.
Yeah, assassination. How
Yeah, I
would
don't
it
think that-
affect the election?
Yeah, I don't think it will affect the election at all.
Not at all.
No. I think if it happened now, it might, but it happened weeks ago, and it's like, everyone forgot about that. And they're not even certain that he actually got shot, but whatever. But that happened a long time. In the United States, well, it's true here too, probably. 5 weeks is like a year. You forgot about it already, so yeah, I don't think it. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, my name is Dora Kim, and I work at the Konkuk University Language Institute. And actually, I have two questions, and they're not that related to today's topic, but I wanted to ask you, so I ask you that currently there are about 1,000 students from 70 countries learning Korean at the Konkuk Language Institute. And actually right now, Korean culture is really popular in the world, I think, because of BTS maybe. And I watched some videos on YouTube about that, about your lectures. And I'm wondering that how long Korean wave can last, and what kind of soft power that Korean have is worth investing in for its sustainability. So
yeah. Well, for one thing, wait, can you get me? So, for one thing, the Korean wave is not going away. And, Korea is really increasingly seen by financial and political analysts around the world as the world's newest superpower. Okay? So, Korea, there's a new analysis that just came out that put Korea as the 6th most powerful nation in the world. It's like, oh, whoa, hang on a second, right? That's really serious. And so not only is it soft power of the Korean wave, but it's actually also hard power of Korea. And, by the way, if you don't start having babies, you can't keep that going. So start having children, y'all, right? Okay. So if the Korean government pays me to tell Koreans to have children. So, you know, listen, have children. But it's not, so the Korean wave really is more than just the soft power of culture. It's really being driven by the power, economic and political power. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to keep going. Yeah.
And also, I have one more question.
That you said that Kamala Harris policies are like going similar to Trump.
Donald Trump.
Yeah. And US is making like they're decreasing the immigration policy. I can maybe and but actually in Korea there are more and more immigrant people are in here. So we are facing that new new situation. So we're facing a lot of foreigners in our country, and I am on 20 ages, and I am looking that kind of situation. And right now I am like considering what kind of work that I have to do in this situation and in my whole life. So how can Korean young people face this kind of social changes, and how can they have their jobs in these situations?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that's happening here in Korea is that the economy is shifting. So the job situation is shifting. So for young Koreans here, those of you who are students, KU students, and who are, you know, you're going to be graduating, you're all thinking about, okay, what kind of job am I getting? What's going to be my first job? What am I going to do, et cetera, right? Well, things are changing. And so it's kind of interesting that, you know, you are all worried about getting jobs when in fact the government of Korea is expanding the number of visas for foreign workers to come into Korea to take jobs. So wait, you all are looking for jobs. Like you're all worried. I'm sure every single student in here is worried that like you're not going to get the job. You're not going to get a job. No, you will get a job. You definitely can get a job. You just may not get the job you want. And the government is bringing foreign workers in because not to take jobs that you're going to have. I mean, some high-level jobs like high-level IT and so on, but mostly it's less skilled laborer jobs. And it's not in Seoul, it's outside of Seoul, right? And many of you don't want to live outside of Seoul, you want to be in Seoul, right? I mean, unless you're from a town or a city outside of Seoul, then maybe you want to go home. But I mean, you know, this is the thing. And so it's very complicated right now in Korea because there's a transformation that's happening here. And so you have to, you know, you're really trying to figure out what to do. And I don't have an answer to that. I wish I did, but it's other than to say, wow, it's so complicated. Korea is in such a state of transformation, but it's very dynamic. And the fact, you know, with the more powerful Korea gets in the world, again, this analysis just came out, you're 6th in the global arena, right? 6th. But what that means is that simply means that your economy is changing. And it's more precarious for you. It's good for the nation, but it's more of a problem for you. Yeah. Is that a fair answer? Okay. It's hard. Hey, and we'll take a couple more questions. Then, you know, I'll stay around so you can ask questions afterwards. I don't want to let people. Yeah.
Hi. My question is still very related to the topics that we discussed. You know, we're talking about the elections in America, and when, as a foreigner and in a foreign country that is not America right now, everyone thinks about the repercussion of the voting, the repercussion of the elections in the whole world.
Yeah.
Especially seeing a new wave of populism and right-wing populism that has been rising in the whole world.
So you would say, wait, where are you from?
I'm from Brazil.
From Brazil? So are Brazilians, like, how often are you thinking about the US elections?
I'm thinking about it very often.
Yeah.
Trump is actually one of the biggest.
It's Bolsonaro. Trump is-
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our last elections were actually won by not Bolsonaro's party, the party against Bolsonaro,
Yeah, exactly.
by 0.5%.
Yeah, barely. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I think about the US elections, I'm mostly not thinking about what is going to happen only to the US, but as probably most of the people in this room, what's going to happen to our countries
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
a country as influential as the US
Yeah.
has a new president.
I would be thinking that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in my mind, after seeing all the maps and seeing how people still stay with the same party, I would like to know, maybe being a sociologist in America and being exposed to so many types of informations, and getting a little bit into the minds of the American voters.
Yeah.
What do they really care about? Is it something that's generational, that maybe my family always voted for Republicans and now it's the values that I bring with me?
Yeah.
Is it something more emotional? I don't think it's very rational, to be very honest.
Yeah.
I don't think people go around and see what they are really saying, what are the policies behind Kamala Harris or Trump.
Yeah.
What do they think about when they're voting for someone? Mostly.
Okay, if I wasn't, let me see. If we weren't live streaming, I would give you my real answer to this. All right. You know what? Okay, I'll give you my real answer to this, but I will make it sound fine for the people who are watching the video from the U.S. or, well, most people in the U.S. are sleeping now, so they're not watching. But and most people watch from around the world, right? But let me say this: voters, including in Brazil, most voters are not educated on policies. They don't know. People don't know Bolsonaro. They don't. They get excited about this guy. If you don't know Bolsonaro in Brazil, Bolsonaro is like Duterte in the Philippines. He's a populist candidate who is the closest to Trump that Brazil has had for a while, right? You can say Lula, but Lula is more like just the opposite side of the aisle, but also very populist, right? Most voters don't think about it, really. Americans are just as the average American is just about as uninformed as the average Brazilian or the average anybody else. Korean's a little more. You all are a little bit more educated. Well, you're much more educated than Americans for sure, right? Probably too educated. You need to stop spending so much time at the hagwons and go out and play soccer or something. I don't know. God, don't study so much. But, okay, they're not thinking. They don't know. Look, the American economy is killing it right now. We're doing so well. The economy is doing so well. Okay, we've had inflation. But every country has had, Brazil has inflation, Korea has inflation, the whole world after COVID had inflation. But Americans get stuck on this idea, oh, the economy is doing bad. The economy is doing great in the United States. But that's just the thing. Nobody stops to say, wait, hang on, what? Because if you stop to say that, you would have to admit that you don't know. And people don't want to admit that they don't know. And so they just go. They don't know the difference. Half of all Americans are going to cast their vote, and they don't even know they couldn't list a single difference between Trump and Harris. That's my answer to that. So if you want to say, yeah, Americans are ignorant, well, voters around the world are ignorant. Most voters don't know. Polish voters, come on, man. The Polish voters want to drink their, what is it, Zivik beer? What's the? Yeah, okay, yeah, so that's it, you know, they're busy. I spent 6 or 8 weeks in Krakow many years before you were born, I'm sure, so, you know. So that's my answer to the question, yeah. It seems like you would know, someone would know, but we don't know. The thing that's different with American voters is Americans are proud of their ignorance. Americans love to say, I don't know anything about it at all, and I don't care. I just want to drink my beer and do whatever I want to do, and because I'm an American. You know, I'm like, really, you're proud of the fact that you're dumb, you're uneducated, you know nothing, but you're proud of that. Yeah, I'm proud of that. Like, that's the difference with Americans. You don't get that here in Korea. Koreans aren't going to stand up and say, I'm proud of the fact that I'm completely ignorant, and that's a good thing. And like, yeah, and I'm Korean. Like, no, you don't do that. You'd be embarrassed to do that. Americans love that. Not every American, obviously, but a significant percentage of them. That scares me. Yeah. Brazilians don't do that. It's an American thing, you know. Are there any Americans here, by the way? You're American? Where are you from?
Virginia.
Virginia? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Virginians you're a little bit more toned down on that. Well, yeah. God. Oh, you got a lot of rednecks and, you know, that whole kind of world. Redneck not in a negative, pejorative way, but, you know.
I think the hole's just getting bigger. I would stop.
It's probably getting, yeah. Huh. Okay. Anybody else? Why don't we cut? Why don't? Yeah. Okay. Let's do another one, and then you can. I'll answer a question afterwards. Okay. Who do you want?
Yes. Thank you, Professor, for your lecture. I would like to ask about the figures you suggested, and in most of the cases in South Korea, rich and privileged people tend to vote for conservative, and this trend shown by region. So, for example, people in Gangnam earns a lot and they vote for conservative all the time. And why isn't this always true for the states? And plus, there was correlation between education level and the party they vote for. Is there any research that tells the reason for it?
Well, yeah, look, first off, you have to understand that when we say there's a correlation between things, sometimes the correlation, it's like, look, I'll stand up here and I'll do this. The more education you have in the United States, the more likely you are to vote for Democrats, okay? So it's like this. You think like, oh, the more education you have, the more you vote for Democrats. Like this. Whoa, you have high education, you vote for Democrats, right? You have low education, you vote for Republicans, like this. But it's actually more like this, where it's like this. It really is not much. It's a correlation, and it's like not really particularly strong, as we say. So. And then we see it here, right? We see certain districts. And sometimes people because most people really don't understand the fundamental differences between parties, including here in Korea, really understand, because there aren't that many differences between the parties. Korea doesn't change. When one party takes over the blue house, so to speak, right? Or if they even live in the blue house, they live somewhere else. But when a different party takes over, things don't change that much in Korea. It's just, a little bit, but not that much. You know. Now, it seems like a lot because you read a headline, but the fact is the government, life just keeps going. It doesn't change. So that's how it is. Most people don't pay attention. They don't know. They just pick a team. It's like baseball right now. Those of you who are baseball fans, why do you support one team or another? Why do the Doosan Bears? Why? Like, why do you support one or another? Because you just randomly chose when you were a little kid or something. It's like, okay, whatever. But, you know. All right. Are we good? Maybe we should end, because some people probably want to go. You get tired of listening to me. And if you have a question, I can answer it afterwards. Or if a couple people, maybe, I want to take a couple photos with people. I always like taking photos myself with my phone. So definitely you all. All right. So why don't we just cut here, and then if you have some questions, I'll answer them. Is that good? And then what we'll do is, I'm coming back in November, as I said, with my wife, and after the elections, and I'm going to do another talk. We'll see what happened, and then we'll talk about it. Hopefully, the United States will still exist. Hopefully, we haven't broken down into a civil war. If we have, then I'll come to Korea. I'll move to Korea, and then I'll teach a whole class here for the next 4 years, and then I'll go back to the United States. I'd rather be here anyway. It's all good. Okay. So 감사합니다. Thank you. Thank you, Loki. Oh yeah, let's do that. Okay. Wait. We could do it this way too. Whatever. You do whatever you want to do.
I think it's better for us than
Yeah. Whatever you want to do. What's that?
If we want to finish the streaming right now, live stream.
Yeah, we can. Hey, if you're watching the live stream, hey, thank you for watching, and we're done. You can just hit end. Yeah. Thank you. Gracias.